I thought surprising him with a weekend in Vegas would be the memory we'd both treasure forever. I booked the flights, the hotel, even the helicopter ride over the Strip at night. Everything was perfect down to the last detail. When I reserved the Steakhouse, I imagined us laughing over cocktails, maybe him raising a toast to me for making it all happen. But standing there, suitcase in hand, watching the way he looked at his phone instead of me, I felt a twinge I couldn't quite name. I brushed it off, telling myself he'd light up once we got there, that the sparkle of the city would erase the flatness in his voice. What I didn't know was that Vegas wouldn't just strip the illusions off the neon skyline. It would strip the illusions out of my relationship too, and leave me with a truth I wasn't ready to face. When we landed, I was the one buzzing with energy, my heart racing as we stepped into the chaos of McCarran Airport. I had been up the night before making sure we had everything packed, tickets printed, outfits laid out, even a little itinerary tucked into my bag. He had just rolled out of bed, tossed a few shirts into a duffel, and muttered something about, "You're overdoing it." I laughed it off, telling myself he didn't mean it, but the sting settled deep. Vegas was loud, alive, glittering like a dream, and I wanted so badly for us to feel like a team. But as we checked into the hotel, he was already scrolling, already distracted, already half gone into another world. He didn't even notice when the receptionist upgraded us to a suite with a strip view. I had to point it out, and all he said was, "Cool." I tried again at the helicopter ride, clutching his arm as we soared over the neon lights, the fountains of Bellagio erupting below, the desert darkness stretching endlessly beyond the city. My hair whipped around my face, the headset pressing into my ears, and I turned to him, expecting awe, maybe even gratitude. Instead, he was filming for Instagram, angles and filters and captions more important than the moment itself. He didn't even notice that I stopped smiling halfway through, that my stomach dropped not from the altitude but from the weight of realization pressing harder with every mile we flew. At dinner, in that famous steakhouse where I had begged for a reservation weeks in advance, I wore the dress he once said was his favorite, the one he claimed made me look like I belonged on the cover of a magazine. He sat across from me, barely glancing up, more fascinated with the menu prices than the fact I had arranged all of it. He ordered the most expensive cut, made a joke about how he deserved it, and when I lifted my glass to toast, he didn't even raise his. "You're trying too hard," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear but soft enough for the waiter not to. I froze, glass in my hand, my smile dying on my lips. The moment I had envisioned, the sparkle of candlelight, his hand reaching for mine, laughter spilling between us, crumbled into silence so heavy I could barely breathe. And then, as if the night hadn't already shattered, his phone buzzed, and the way his face lit up told me instantly that the message wasn't from me. I excused myself to the restroom, locking the stall door and pressing my back against it, trying to collect myself while the hum of Vegas nightlife bled through the walls. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Perfect hair, flawless makeup, a woman who had tried so hard to orchestrate joy, only to feel invisible across the table. I dabbed at the corners of my eyes, refusing to let mascara streak, refusing to let anyone in this restaurant see me break. When I returned, he barely noticed I'd been gone. His steak was half-eaten, his glass refilled, his thumb tapping out replies on his phone. I asked casually who he was texting. He smirked without looking up. "Just friends. Don't start." My heart thudded. I forced a smile, nodding, but my stomach churned with a clarity I wasn't ready to admit. Later, in the suite, I tried to salvage what was left, suggesting a walk down the strip, maybe even a turn at the tables. He declined, claiming he was tired, but I knew he wasn't. He sprawled across the bed with his phone glowing against his face, his laughter low and private, and I stood by the window watching the lights of the city flicker endlessly, wondering how something so dazzling could feel so hollow. The next morning, I woke early, sunlight spilling through the curtains, and found him in the bathroom with the door cracked open, whispering into the phone. He didn't see me watching, didn't hear the way my breath caught when he said her name, a name I knew, a name he swore meant nothing months ago. My body went cold, but I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I quietly dressed, slipped my sandals on, and walked out into the desert heat, the strip already alive with tourists clutching drinks and chasing thrills. I wandered aimlessly, the noise of slot machines spilling from every doorway, until I realized something. This trip wasn't about us anymore. It was about me, about finally seeing what was in front of me and deciding what to do with it. By the time I came back to the hotel, the suite smelled of cologne and leftover room service. He was sprawled across the bed, half asleep, his phone on the nightstand glowing with unread notifications. I sat at the desk, pulled the little itinerary I had made from my purse, and looked at the neat handwriting. Check-in, dinner, helicopter ride, brunch by the pool. I had imagined him grinning at every surprise, telling his friends back home how lucky he was, maybe even calling me the best thing that ever happened to him. Instead, the paper looked pathetic now, like proof of how hard I was willing to work for someone who wouldn't lift a finger for me. That evening, when I suggested, "We go out again," he rolled his eyes. "Can we just chill? I don't need all this extra stuff." I wanted to ask him why he came at all if everything I planned was extra, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded and quietly slipped out alone, walking into the neon chaos with nothing but my thoughts for company. I ended up at the casino bar, ordering a drink I didn't even want, staring at the rows of flashing machines and the strangers cheering at the tables. That's when I heard laughter behind me, two women, both tourists, swapping stories about their romantic disasters, one of them bragging about how she caught her man sneaking off with another woman mid-vacation. They laughed like it was nothing, like betrayal was some casual punchline. My chest tightened, and in that moment I realized I was sitting in the middle of a city built on illusions, clinging to my own. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through old photos of us, and each one felt staged, like snapshots of a role I'd been playing. The girl who made everything look perfect while he gave almost nothing back. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself imagine what my life would look like without him. The thought didn't terrify me. It steadied me. The next day, I put on a brave face, slipping into the sundress I'd packed for our brunch reservation by the pool. I had called ahead weeks in advance, picturing us sipping mimosas in the warm Vegas sun, maybe even laughing about how over the top the whole weekend had been. Instead, he showed up late, sunglasses hiding the hangover in his eyes, his voice clipped as he muttered about how crowded the place was. I tried to steer the conversation, asking if he liked the view, if he was excited for the show tickets I had lined up for that night, but every response was short, dismissive, like I was some annoying tour guide dragging him from one stop to the next. When the waiter came, he ordered without looking up from his phone, and I watched the way his thumb hovered just a little too long, waiting for that next buzz, that next message. My chest tightened, but I kept my smile in place because I wasn't going to let strangers see me unravel. After brunch, we walked through the casino floor, the sound of slot machines and cheers crashing around us, and I tried one last time to pull him into the moment. I put a 20 into a machine, pressed the button, and laughed when the screen lit up, more from nervous energy than luck. He just sighed, muttered that I was wasting money, and walked ahead without waiting for me. I stared at his back moving farther into the crowd, and it hit me. The man I thought I was in love with wasn't even here with me. His body was, sure, but his attention, his care, his respect, they belonged elsewhere. Maybe to the woman whose name he whispered in that bathroom. That night, as I dressed for the show, sliding on the heels I had chosen carefully for this trip, I realized I was going through the motions alone. He sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling again, and when I asked if he was ready, he glanced up like I was an inconvenience. "Do we really have to go?" he said. I looked at him, at the man who couldn't even fake excitement for the gift I had built piece by piece, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg anymore, wasn't going to plan my life around crumbs of attention. I went to the show alone, sliding into the velvet seat while the lights dimmed, and for the first time all weekend, I felt free. The stage lit up, music filled the theater, and I realized I didn't need him there to enjoy it. When I walked back to the suite later, he was asleep, phone clutched in his hand, and I knew it was the beginning of the end. The final morning in Vegas, I woke up before him. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner, the curtains drawn tight against the desert sun. I sat at the desk with my coffee, watching him sleep, his phone on the nightstand, buzzing every so often, lighting up with a name I didn't need to read to recognize. I thought about everything I had done for this weekend. Months of saving, of comparing flights and hotels, of imagining us hand in hand under the neon glow, and how little he seemed to notice, let alone appreciate. It wasn't just about Vegas. It was about every birthday where I planned the party, every anniversary where I bought the gift, every dinner where I picked the place, paid half, and still ended up being told I was lucky to be with him. This trip was just the loudest version of a pattern that had been whispering to me for years, and suddenly, it was deafening. When he finally stirred, rubbing his eyes and groaning, the first thing he reached for was the phone, not me. I asked if he wanted to grab breakfast before checkout, and he shrugged, mumbling something about grabbing food at the airport instead. My chest ached, but not from longing anymore, from clarity. I packed my suitcase carefully, folding each dress, each piece of lingerie I had chosen for nights that never happened, tucking away not just clothes but the last of my hope. He barely noticed. At the airport, I watched him from across the terminal, as he leaned against a pillar, phone pressed to his ear, laughing in a way I hadn't heard all weekend. That laugh used to be mine. Now it was hers. I could have confronted him then, could have made a scene in front of strangers, but I didn't. I simply walked to the gate, boarding pass in hand, and made a decision. On the flight home, while he snored beside me with his headphones on, I opened my notes app and wrote out everything I had been too afraid to say. Line after line spilled onto the screen, about how I was done planning my life around someone who couldn't be bothered to show up, how I was done competing with a glowing screen for attention, how I was done shrinking myself just to keep the peace. By the time we landed, my chest felt lighter than it had in years. I didn't hand him the note right away. I waited until we were back in the apartment, the suitcases still by the door, the silence thick between us. Then I slid my phone across the table and watched as his eyes skimmed the words, his smirk faltering for the first time all weekend. He looked up, ready to argue, but I didn't let him. "You don't need to say anything," I told him quietly, "because I've already said everything." I picked up my keys, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door before he could reply. The city outside wasn't Vegas, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sparkling, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. He tried to call me the next day, his number flashing across my screen again and again, but I didn't answer. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring at the quiet apartment, realizing how strange it felt to hear only my own breathing. Strange, but not bad. For years, I had lived with the background noise of his complaints, his sighs, his constant distractions, the sharp sting of his indifference disguised as jokes. Now, the silence felt like medicine. He sent messages, long ones at first, saying I had overreacted, that I was ruining something good, that he was just busy during our trip. Then the short ones came. "Call me, stop ignoring me, we need to talk." Each one I read once, then deleted. He didn't understand that the Vegas trip had been the perfect mirror held up to our entire relationship. Every dollar I spent, every detail I planned, every ounce of energy I poured into making it beautiful was met with apathy, distraction, or worse, disdain. That wasn't just Vegas. That was us. My friends noticed the change in me quickly. Over brunch the following weekend, I told them what happened, how the trip had exposed more than I could ignore. They didn't gasp in shock. They nodded knowingly, confessing they had seen the red flags long before I admitted them to myself. "We just didn't know how to tell you," one of them said softly, squeezing my hand. It stung, but it also freed me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't asking for too much. I had just been asking the wrong person. When he finally showed up outside my building, pacing in the parking lot like a man rehearsing his lines, I watched him from the window upstairs. He looked small suddenly, not larger than life as I used to see him. He looked like a boy who had never learned how to treat love as a gift instead of a guarantee. I didn't go down. I didn't open the door. Instead, I let him stand there, knocking and calling my name, while I sat in the calm of my living room, heart steady, decision unshakable. Because leaving wasn't the hardest part, it was realizing I should have done it sooner. Weeks passed, and the silence between us turned permanent. He tried a few last-ditch attempts, sending flowers to my office, leaving voicemails where his voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed, even tagging me in old photos on social media like nostalgia could erase the truth. I didn't bite. I had already begun reclaiming myself in small but powerful ways. Saturday mornings spent at the farmer's market instead of waiting for him to wake up, evenings filled with books and long walks instead of scrolling beside someone glued to his phone, dinners with friends where my laughter was real, not forced. The more distance I put between us, the clearer it all became. His love had always been conditional, measured in how convenient I was for him, how much effort I could carry so he didn't have to. And once I stopped carrying it, the entire illusion crumbled. My parents asked carefully about him, not pushing, but I could see the relief in their eyes when I told them it was over. My mother even whispered, "I was afraid you'd settle for that forever." That night, lying in my bed alone, I realized I wasn't lonely. I was lighter. I thought back to Vegas, to the helicopter ride, to the city glittering beneath us while he stared into his phone. And I promised myself, never again. Never again would I build grand gestures for someone who couldn't even look me in the eye. Never again would I confuse crumbs for a feast. Never again would I mistake distraction for devotion. Vegas had cost me thousands of dollars and one broken heart, but it had given me the most valuable clarity of all. I deserved a love that showed up, not one I had to chase. Months later, I barely recognized the woman I had been in Vegas. The one who begged for scraps of attention, who booked helicopter rides and candlelit dinners hoping he'd finally see her worth. That woman felt like a stranger, a faded version of me I had quietly buried. I started building new routines, new anchors that didn't revolve around him. Yoga classes at sunrise, Sunday dinners with friends where we cooked together in messy kitchens, solo movie nights where I didn't have to check if someone else was bored. The silence that once felt so foreign became sacred. Every now and then, his shadow still tried to creep back into my life. A mutual friend would mention he was sorry now, that he had realized what he lost. But what he lost was never going to be mine to carry again. Because the truth was, I hadn't just left him, I had outgrown him. The man who thought a glowing phone screen was more thrilling than a skyline of neon lights, who thought mocking me was easier than thanking. Me? Who thought bare minimum effort was enough to keep me begging. That man could never stand beside the woman I was becoming. The turning point came when I stumbled across my old itinerary for Vegas tucked in a drawer. The neat handwriting, the perfect plans, the little notes I had written like, "He'll love this." It almost made me cry. But not from sadness, from gratitude. Because that paper reminded me how far I'd come, how much I had learned to stop proving myself to people unwilling to see. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle, and wrote a new list. Not an itinerary for someone else, but a list of what I wanted for me. Places I wanted to see, goals I wanted to chase, the kind of love I wanted to welcome someday. Love that showed up. Love that didn't need grand gestures to be alive. Love that was steady, present, real. And in that moment, I realized the trip I thought would make us unbreakable had actually saved me. It had broken the illusion, exposed the truth, and given me the courage to walk away before I wasted another year of my life. Vegas didn't give me the fairy tale I planned. It gave me freedom. And I decided I was never giving that back. Looking back now, I see Vegas not as the end of a relationship, but as the beginning of my freedom. The city was a stage, and every detail I planned became a spotlight, exposing truths I had been too afraid to name. I had believed that if I gave enough, if I poured my soul into grand gestures and perfect weekends, eventually he would meet me, halfway. Instead, I learned that some people never will, not because they can't, but because they simply don't want to. He thrived on taking, on letting me carry the weight of every plan, every effort, every sacrifice, while he coasted through life convinced that bare minimum was a prize. Vegas stripped that illusion clean away. The helicopter ride wasn't just a tourist attraction, it was a mirror. I looked out at a city glowing beneath us, but inside that cabin, I sat next to someone who wasn't even present. And in that silence, louder than the whir of the blades, I realized I was already alone. The steakhouse dinner, the brunch by the pool, the show tickets, all those things I had dreamed would make him say, "You're the one," only showed me how little he valued being there at all. And as painful as it gave me the sharpest clarity of my life. I didn't need to fight for someone who wouldn't even lift his eyes to see me. The aftermath was not glamorous. There were nights I lay awake replaying every moment, wondering if I had failed, if I had done too much or too little, if I could have saved it somehow. But healing comes in waves, and slowly I understood that walking away wasn't failure. It was self-respect. Each day without him became a small victory, drinking coffee without waiting for him to text, choosing what I wanted for dinner without compromise, hearing my own thoughts without his constant noise. And in that silence, I discovered parts of myself I had neglected. The ambitious woman who had dreams outside of catering to someone else's comfort. The creative soul who once filled notebooks with ideas. The strong friend who lifted others when they needed it. She had been buried under the weight of trying too hard, and now she was breathing again. I won't lie, there was anger too. Anger that I wasted money, time, and tears on a man who gave nothing back. Anger that he dared to call me dramatic, to say I was ruining something good, when all he ever gave me was less than enough. But I let that anger fuel me instead of break me. I poured it into building a life where my energy went to people and places that gave back. I traveled on my own. I booked dinners with girlfriends who actually looked me in the eye and listened. I took myself to shows, to art galleries, to hikes where the only buzz I heard was bees and not the ping of someone else's phone. And slowly, the ache turned into something else. Pride. Pride that I didn't crumble. Pride that I didn't go back. Pride that I chose myself when it would have been easier to settle for less. Today, if you ask me what Vegas gave me, I won't tell you about the skyline or the casinos or the steakhouse. I'll tell you it gave me the hardest goodbye wrapped inside the clearest revelation. I'll tell you it gave me the strength to end a story that was never truly mine, and the courage to start writing one that is. Because here's the truth. Love isn't about helicopter rides or expensive dinners. It isn't about grand plans or picture-perfect weekends. It's about presence. It's about being seen, being chosen, every single day, even in the quiet moments. And he never gave me that. But I give it to myself now. And one day, if love finds me again, it will be with someone who doesn't need to be dazzled to stay. Someone who understands that I am enough without the neon lights. Until then, I live for me. And that is the greatest gift Vegas ever gave.